So normally we see that in every language we have data types and variables. So in that same way we have C# data types and variables. So this C# data types, I mean, as we know that C# is a strongly typed language, and it means that we cannot use variables without data types. So important principle for .NET framework is that you should have data type prerequisite as a prerequisite if we want to define any variable. So because it's a compiler based language, so data types tell the compiler which type of data is used for processing. Okay, so data types are sets or ranges of values that have similar characteristics. So normally data types are characterized by name, for example integer, float, double and long, size, how much size of memory it should take, like for example 1 byte, 2 byte, 4 bytes or 8 bytes. And normally the default value, if you take integer as a default value, then it will be like 0, which is the default value for integer. Now normally the basic data types within C# that are distributed in the following types. First one is integer type. Integer type has nothing but s byte, short byte, byte, short, unsigned short, integer, unsigned int, long and unsigned long. Real floating point types like float and double. Real type with decimal precision like decimal. Boolean type is nothing but bool. Character type is char. String is a string. Object type is an object. So these data types are all called, above data types are called primitive data types. Those are nothing but the built-in data types that are used or embedded into the C# language at the lowest level. Now normally in the below table, if you see that I have defined a tabular structure which will define the data types, the default values, the minimum value and the maximum value. The first one is signed byte. The signed byte default value is 0, the minimum value is -1 to 8 and the maximum value is 1 to 7. Next data type is byte. Byte default value is 0, minimum value is 0 and maximum value is 255. Next is short. Default value is 0, the minimum value is -32,768 and the maximum value is 32,767. Unsigned short, the default value is 0, minimum value is 0 and the maximum value is 65,535. Then we have integer, the default value is 0 and we have minimum value -2147483,648 and the maximum value 2147483,647 and so on. We have different types of data types like unsigned int, long where 0l is the one, unsigned long is 0u, float is 0.0f, double is 0.0d, decimal is 0.0m, boolean default value is false, the character is /u and 4 zeros, object is null and the string is null. So these are all the different primitive data types which are there in the .NET framework or else C#. I have defined one more table which has a category. Category wise I have categorized all the data types like integer, float, character, other, and a second column is class or structure name. The third column is data type in C#. The fourth column is number of bytes and the fifth column is the range. So now to start with, we have integer category. In the integer category we have different classes like system.byte, which is a data type called byte and number of bytes is 1. Then we have system.signedByte, which is data type which is signed byte and which has the value of 1 which is signed and the range is -1 to 8 to 1 to 7. Then we have system.int16, which is a data type short, number of bytes is 2 which is a sign and the range we have -32768 to 32767. Then we have system.unsignedInt16, which is unsigned short and which has number of bytes as 2. Then we have system.integer32, which data type is integer and number of bytes is 4. Then we have unsignedInt32, which is 4 unsigned. Then we have int64, which is nothing but a long and which has number of bytes as 4. Then we have int64, which is a long data type that has number of bytes as 8. Then we have unsigned int64, which is again number of bytes as 8 and unsigned. So these are all about integer categorization. Then we move on to float data type categorization, where we have single as a class name and the data type is float and number of bytes is 4. Then we have class as double and the data type is double and number of bytes is 8. Then we have decimal, number of bytes is 16. So these are all the float category type categorizations. Then we have character, which is char and number of bytes is 2. Then string is nothing but it's a reference type and its size varies. Then we have datetime, which has number of bytes as 8. Then boolean, which the number of bytes is 1. Then we have object. Object is kind of a reference data type and its size also varies. Then we have integer, pointer which is platform dependent, and pointer to a memory address. So these are all the different data types and their categorizations. Now why we go for integer types? Normally when integer type represents integer numbers such as signed byte, byte, short, unsigned short, integer, unsigned int, and long and unsigned long. Normally signed byte is a 8-bit signed integer, and that means the number of possible values for it is 28, and which has 256 values together, and the minimum value for signed byte is -128 and the maximum value is 127. A default value is number 0. Then we have byte type, which is 8-bit unsigned integer, and it also has 256 different integer values, and it can be a non-negative, and its default value is 0, and byte minimum value is 0 and the maximum value is 255. Then we have short type, which is a 16-bit signed integer. Its minimum value is -32768 and maximum value 32767. Then we have unsigned short, which is a 16-bit unsigned integer. Then an integer, which is a 32-bit signed integer. Then we have unsigned int long. So I've just again defined some of the default values for the interview purpose. So whenever you have some questions which are based on the default values of the different data types, then you can just go through these all values. So we know that 8 bits make 1 byte, so that's the reason I have mentioned in terms of the bits. Now if we see the declaration of all the integer type values, then we can see that I have defined a variable called byte centuries, which is been assigned the value of 20. Then unsigned short years, which is been assigned at 2000. Then you have unsigned int, which is days, which I have defined some value, and unsigned long. Now when I try to consult output of all these values, then I can see that all my different values are being output to the window. Then the default maximum value also put it. Now let's run this application in a console app and see what each of the individual values provided to us. So initially we'll go with byte. Then we'll go with unsigned short. So unsigned short, I'm just defining some value. So when I say, see why it's throwing error, because it's a the size varies and it doesn't allow that much size, so that is the reason it has throwing a compilation error. Then what I'll do is I'll define an unsigned int, which is a days, and I'll define some value here, and now I'll output my value. So you have to append using plus operator if you want to work with strings. So I'm just appending some string values here so that I can display my respective values. And I'll try to display my values. And I'll try to build my application, and I'll try to run my application, FI or start. You can see that all my different values are visible here and they are being showcased here. So that is how you work with the integer data types. Then we have a second type of data types which are called real or floating point types. So this real type float is a type which will have a 32-bit real floating type, which is of float type, and the single precision real number, and the default value is 0.0 small f or 0.0 capital F, both are equivalent, and the considered type as an accuracy up to 7 decimal places. For example, if the number is 0.123456789 and if it is stored as a type float, then it will be rounded up to the after decimal 7 floating type. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 8 is something, it will stop the precision. Then we have real type double. This second type of floating point type is a double type, and it is a precision real number, and it is of 64-bit type, and the default value is 0.0D and 0.0 capital D, and D is not mandatory, but it comes with the framework data type stuff. So this type has a precision of up to 15 to 16 decimal digits. So after decimal point, the precision can be up to 15 to 16 decimal digits. So I've just mentioned all the precision types, like float is 7 digits after decimal, double is 15 to 16 digits after decimal, and decimal is 28 or 29 digits after the decimal type. So I've just given some examples. You can try in your console apps and try to run this data types so that you are aware of how much, like what kind of values you get and what kind of type conversion you need to make. Suppose if you want to type convert from lower data type to higher data type, or higher data type to the lower data type. So I've just given some decimal precisions for double as well. You can just go through it. And the next type of data type is Boolean. We know that Boolean is a data type which is declared with the keyword bool, and the two possible values for this are true or false. A default value is false, and it is used to store the calculation result of all the logical expressions. Next thing is character type. Character type is a single character where you can have a 16-bit number of a Unicode table character, and it is declared with the keyword known as char. The smallest possible value for char is 0, and the largest is 65535, and the values of type char are letters or other characters that are enclosed in apostrophes. Suppose if I am defining my character ch as a, and if I try to console.writeLine ch of a, then it will return the ASCII value. Suppose the ASCII value of small letter a is 97, the ASCII value of small letter b is 98, and the ASCII value of capital letter A is 65. And in the next further classes, we'll see about strings and the type conversions, boxing and unboxing. Hope you had a good understanding of the data types in today's class, and in next class we'll see about continue with the strings, with the value types, the reference types, and further to that we'll have further internal discussion on the different types of type conversions between lower data type and higher data type. Thank you.